Good afternoon, members. Welcome to this digital meeting of the Governance and Audit Committee being held via Microsoft Teams on Tuesday, the 20th of July 2021 at 2 o'clock. Just to confirm that this meeting will be recorded and made available to view via the Council's website, except for discussions involving confidential or exempt items. Therefore, the images, audio of those individuals present and or speaking with publicly available to all via the recording on the Council's website at caerphilly.gov.uk. If members lose connection during the meeting, please make every effort to reconnect. However, the meeting will continue as long as it remains correct. Committee services staff are available and will be able to assist you to reconnect if necessary. I wish also to remind everybody that Chair has a discretion to terminate or suspend recording if, in my opinion, continuing to do so would prejudice the proceedings or that continued recording might infringe the rights of any individual. The Chair also has the right to remove persons from the remote meeting if that is necessary. Can I also remind members to please mute their microphones but to leave their cameras on? Can I please ask the officers have their microphones and cameras turned off until they are invited to present their reports or speak on an item? Members and officers should only activate their microphones after the Chair has invited them to speak on an item. Today we'll be using Microsoft Forms within the show conversation for voting on the agenda items, where the voting poll will appear, and then members are asked to click on the yes, no, abstain, and then click on submit vote. I'd like to take a roll call of the members to confirm the attendance. Councillor Adams.
Present, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Aldworth.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Bevan. Councillor Gale. I thought I saw Councillor Gale on the listing.
She must have failed to connect, Chair.
Right. Okay. Not present at the moment. Maybe we'll get a bit on later on. Councillor Hardiger. Councillor Miles.
Present.
Councillor Parry. Councillor Ridgewell.
Present, Chair.
Councillor Simmons. Graham Simmons.
Yes.
And Councillor Julia Simmons.
Present, Chair.
And Councillor Stenner.
Present.
For the records, I'll ask the officers to answer their presence. Officer Richard Edmonds.
I'm here, Chair. Afternoon.
Thank you. Steve Harris.
Yeah, present, Chair.
Lynn Donovan. Deb Cornell.
Yeah, I'm here, thank you.
Lisa Lane. Apologies for Lisa Lane. Apologies for Sue Richards and Ross Roberts.
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Thank you. Audit Wales. Anthony Veal.
Apologies from Anthony Veal, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Gareth Jones.
Present, Chair.
Mark Jones.
Present, Chair.
Nicola Gibbs.
Nicola doesn't attend. She shouldn't.
Okay.
She's not an attendee.
Non Jenkins.
Non isn't able to attend.
Okay. And Roger Davis.
Yeah, apologies from Rodri.
Okay.
Chair, it's Steve Harris speaking. Can I just come in a second, if that's okay?
Yes.
We also have one of my colleagues from finance with us today, Andrew Southcombe.
Yeah, I saw him on the list there. So, Andrew, could you explain your status in the meeting?
I'm present, Chair.
Present, and I take it you're observer.
I'm here if any questions that arise out of some of the content of the reports that Steve calls me in on. Okay,
thank you for that. I have got two apologies of Margaret Sargent and Colin Mann. Is anyone else aware of any apologies that I've missed? No? Okay, thank you. I'd like to move on to item 2, declaration of interest. Councillors and officers are reminded that their personal responsibility to declare any personal and/or prejudiced interests in respect of any of the business on this agenda in accordance with the Local Government Act of 2000, the Council Constitution and the Code of Conduct for both councillors and officers. Please use your hands up function to indicate if you have any such declarations. Okay, so there's no hands up, so I'll move on to item 3, to approve and sign the minutes for accuracy. So, minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of June. I shall go through the pages one at a time, and please bring it to my attention if you have known anything that is inaccurate. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, and page 8. Can I have someone to move that they are to an accurate record?
Move, Chair.
And second?
Second, Chair.
Thank you. I think we now have to vote.
Sorry, Chair, that should be coming up on your screens now.
Yeah, right. Yes, we are. Okay. For the record, can I make a verbal vote that Nigel Yates accepts they are a true and accurate record? And has everybody finished their voting? So we've got 5 yes and 1 abstain. Julie, is that total of correct in the voting?
Yeah, that's fine, Chair. That's
Okay.
carried.
Thank you for that. Okay, can we move on to item 4, please? Governance and Audit Committee Forward Works Programme. Presented by Mr. Steve Harris.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This will be quite brief. We've taken the work programme through now to the meeting scheduled for October. You'll see that we have a meeting on the 30th of September, which is essentially to approve the financial statements for the 2021 financial year prior to consideration by the Council on the 14th of October. And for the 12th of October, we currently have 2 items scheduled. Now, you will recall that we did agree that we would limit agenda items to 4 for discussion at meetings. So there is some room for a couple of items to be added on the 12th of October. I'd like to propose 1 item, and this has come out of the annual governance statement for 2021, and that is a review of the risk management strategy. So with the agreement of the committee, I'd like to bring that paper through in October before we take it on to Cabinet. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Harris. Are there any questions regarding the Forward Work Programme?
None, just to agree with Steve Harris's suggestion on that extra item, Chair.
Okay, thank you for that. Can we have someone move that we accept the forward work programme?
I will so move.
Thank you. And can I have a seconder, please?
Second.
Thank you. Can now we vote, please? Just to wait for the voting process to come up. Is the system slow, Julie?
The voting appeared on my screen. I don't know whether it's not on everybody
I've got
else's.
item 3 in mine still, so there's nothing. The generator 4 forward work programme, I saw on the bottom. Right, fine with it now. Oh, can I place my verbal vote and agree with the report? That's Nigel Yates agreeing. I think we've all voted on that item, so thank you for that. Now, can we now move on to item 5, please, the corporate risk register, presented by Ross Roberts. Thank you, Ross.
Thank you, Chair. Right, good afternoon, members. Can you all hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so I know I've got fans blasting in the background, so I just come on to the corporate risk register. So you will recall you receive the corporate risk register twice a year to be assured that we are managing our risks. But if you can be assured that we manage them more frequently, our corporate management team do robustly monitor them on a quarterly basis as well. So on 2.3, it just sums up that we have 13 risks currently on the register. And I would take you to 5.5, where it gives you a little bit of breakdown on what has changed since the last time. And so, although there are no new risks since the last time, there's been a bit of ebb and flow between risks that were low and maybe are now medium and vice versa. And 5.6, it talks about the separate COVID-19 recovery register, which is not replicated on the one that you're about to look at. And the annual governance statement, I think my colleague has picked up on regarding the risk strategy update. But in terms of the actual register, which is on the appendices attached, I would open to questions now and see if anything you want to discuss on the specific risks as noted on the appendices.
Any hands up? I think I've got Councillor Simmons with a question. I got a hand up now of Councillor Ridgewell. You're on mute, John.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ross. Yeah, a couple of questions, just rather granular detail. So I don't know whether you're going to be able to help on this at all. But I noticed that there are 2 or 3 items that are in the red zone. So clearly I focused on those. And I think it's CRR 05, which is talking about ash dieback.
Yeah.
Okay, right. You might not have the answer to this question, but it did occur to me this is going to be an extensive program, and I wonder if there's any details at this stage about when this program might be starting, so we could get a kind of feel for when the expenditure is going to commence, and equally perhaps the sort of timescales over which this work is going to take place, because I'm hazarding a guess it's a huge program.
Oh, I'm happy to come in on that, Chair, if that's okay. You may recall, Councillor Ridgewell, the report that I brought into Council last week had a number of proposals in there in respect of one-off investments, one of which was the establishment of a reserve of £750,000 to progress the work on ash dieback. The plan currently is that we'll be spending £250,000 per annum. Clearly, when we get to the end of year 3, we'll need to reconsider our position at that point. But for now, you did agree last week at Council to set aside the £750,000.
Thank you, Steve. And if I can if you bear with me, Chair, the other one was it's CRR 06 and the replacement LDP, and I noticed that part of that is in the high risk category, but it seems to bleed out from that. So a bit of an explanation on that would be helpful for me, if that's okay.
Right. So just looking on my screen for the depth. That's still high, has been high all along. I don't think we've got anybody with communities with us today, have we? Because I can get, I don't know the answer to that, councillor, but I can get more information, of course, and come back. I know it's been high risk for a while, so it hasn't sort of dropped down.
Chair, I've just noticed that Ed has put his hands up. I don't know if he wants to come in on this one.
I can do, Chair, but it's just to expand on what Ros has said. I think for a detailed answer on this one, Councillor Ridgewell, we probably need Mark S. Williams or someone from his directorate here. I think in the absence of Mark, if I can arrange for Mark to provide a briefing note to members of the audit committee that answers that question, I'll get that circulated to you over the next day or two.
That works fine for me, thanks. Yep, cheers.
Okay, Councillor Simmons, Graham Simmons.
Yep, thank you. I got a question on CRR02. The failure to make sufficient savings. Now, every year since I got elected, we've made budget cuts and we've recorded budget underspends. Could somebody flesh that out for me, please?
Yeah, I think the risk is that we would find ourselves in a position where we have not made sufficient savings to set a balanced budget. But you're quite right, Councillor Simmons, year on year, we have been able to identify sufficient savings to date, and they've been approved as part of the budget process every year. For the current year, we didn't need any new savings due to the financial settlement. But moving forward, there is still a risk. As you'll recall, the last iteration of the medium-term financial plan that was presented to Council did show a potential savings requirement of £21 million for the next 4 years. So obviously we're keeping that under close review, but the risk does remain that if we were not able to identify sufficient savings, then that would obviously have a negative impact on our financial position. So that's why we keep that one on the register, Councillor Simmons.
Yeah, but while we're making the cuts, we're recording budget underspends, approximately 10 million a year.
We are reporting underspends. Again, you'll have seen the detail in the council report last week of why the underspend occurred in the last financial year. It isn't all on the general fund. Some of the underspends are on the HRA. Some of it relates to schools. Very often where we do get underspends, they are savings in advance where we may not be filling vacant posts, etc. And then they will translate into actual savings as we move forward. You will see from the financial sustainability assessment report that's on the agenda later that we have agreed to have a look at our budget monitoring processes to see whether there's any areas where we could potentially make improvements. We've agreed to do that work and we'll pick that up as part of the Sustainable Financial Planning Corporate Review.
Richard Evans, you wanted to come in on that, did you?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just to point out that we are classifying this risk as medium. So I think whilst we may have had a positive position this year with the savings targets that Steve's articulated, it would be wise for us to retain this as a risk, albeit recognise it as a medium risk at this stage. Certainly not high.
Thank you. Okay, Graham, you've got...
oh yeah, I
the answers on
questions on. But the difficulty arises when you have to explain that to, well, my neighbours in particular, but members of the public, that their council tax is going up and we're having budget underspends. Certainly, particularly on Friday and Saturday nights, it can get quite interesting, the level of conversation. I've also got a question, if we don't mind, please, on CRR03 GDPR information. I seen in the, I think it was the Caerphilly Observer the other day, that there'd been 51 complaints about Caerphilly missing statutory targets. And as we see in the report, there are fines of up to 20 million euros for missing these dates, these targets. We were told, I think I'll wing this, but I'll say February, March, that the information unit was back up to full strength. So what is the problem?
Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Simmons. I think most of what you've referred to there was put into Councillor Stenner by way of a set of questions from Councillor Etheridge. I believe Councillor Stenner will be responding to those questions. Just to put a couple of the things that you said into context, in the time frame that we've been talking about, I think that unit has received somewhere in the region of 2,850 FOI, EIA or SAR requests. Of that 2,850, 52, I believe, have been complaints. What's pointed out in the response to Councillor Etheridge is the council can do little about someone being frustrated with the views of the CIGU on certain FOIs. Anyone can complain. When you look at the number of the complaints that were actually upheld or partially upheld, I think it equated to 0.14% of all of the FOIs that were dealt with by that team. What we also pointed out to Councillor Etheridge is that while the CIGU may be back at full capacity at this point, it still needs to work with other areas across the organisation who, of course, still have staff tied up in COVID response. So it's not just that team and its capacity, it's a united effort across the organisation. I think we've accepted that performance hasn't hit targets of late, but we're also confident that backlog will be shifted. But in the grand scheme of things, 0.14% of complaints against 2,850 FOIs processed, in my view, is a relatively low amount. That said, we always like to learn lessons, and we'll do so in this case. But if you haven't received the response from Councillor Etheridge yet, I'm sure he'll send it across to you shortly.
Well, I'll make the claim that was, or state the claim that was made by the central government. Failure to comply with the freedom of information is an attack on democracy. And I'd like to ask Mr. Harris, how many of these fines would he need to have before, things are perked up?
Just on that as well, Councillor Simmons, if I may, there's some clarifying remarks at the back of the response to Councillor Etheridge about the Ombudsman being particularly pragmatic at the moment as we're in the middle of a public emergency. So we've not had fines. We are not being asked to do anything above and beyond what's currently required of us by the regulators. They are in fact being quite sensible under the circumstances. That said, we naturally want to get back to the high levels of performance that we were operating at ahead of the pandemic, and we'll do that fairly swiftly. Thanks.
Well, my next one was CRR6. I'm sorry about this, I'm having real trouble with my monitors jumping all over the place. Yeah, the adopted LDP. I couldn't find any reference in the documents to the shortfall in playing fields that we have across the county borough. It's something of the order of 28 to 30 fields, according to the National Playing Fields Guidelines. We've sold two in Aberbargod. We're in the process of putting one across in Ystrad Mynach. If the sale goes through for Pontypridd Ffraeth, we'll lose another two. So is there any scope or any intention to provide replacement playing fields?
Again, Chair, if I may, not an area of my expertise, Councillor Simmons, but I am aware as regards to the LDP that's under development, there's a number of member working groups taking place at the moment where the needs and requirements of all aspects of the community can be put on record and factored into that LDP. So I'm not sure if you're involved in those, but if you're not, I'd encourage you to join that discussion as quickly as possible and make those representations.
I am involved in that table, as indeed I was in the 2010 LDP, and I don't think we provided, and I'm prepared to be wrong on this, I don't think we provided one new field for all the fields that we're losing. But still, as I said, I am prepared to be wrong on that. And my second one, or my last one, is the CRR08, our schools attainment. It's 22 years since I've been going on about the position of Caerphilly in the Welsh tables. In 2011, the Welsh government stopped publishing them, but quite clearly the Audit Wales has picked up on this, and they've got the information from somewhere. So again, as I said, I started flagging this 22 years ago. I don't know what new measures are being undertaken, if any. Could you please flesh that out?
Yeah, I'm sorry, you might have been a little bit confused there by what you said, Councillor Simmons. The league tables, as you described them, didn't disappear in 2011. The comparator information has been available until very recently. What has changed is Welsh Government's policy position. We, as a local authority, are no longer allowed to compare our schools against one another or compare our LAs against one another. So the use of that performance information isn't made publicly available now, but you'll also appreciate the Education Committee do receive a report every year that sets out how our schools have performed. And we've also received a number of discussions, a number of representations from the AS about how it is difficult for us as an LEA and you as members to assess performance when the core information that we need to do that, we're not allowed to share publicly. So there's a range of measures being developed at the moment. Some of those will be qualitative. That said, you and I have had many conversations about this over the years, and the last conversation I had with you, I was able to demonstrate to you in evidence that we are not in the bottom quartile performing local education authorities. We did make a 5% gain on the Welsh average in the year in question. Unfortunately, the years that have followed have been the years that have been subject to COVID. So, of course, centre determined grades are less reliable than exam grades, but nonetheless, the progress we were making ahead of that time was positive. And I've got no reason to doubt that if we'd continued that work through COVID and been able to do things we'd been doing previously, we'd be in a very strong position now. But as I say, you know, we both share a view about how useful that information might be. It's not something we retain or we stop you from having as an LA. It's something we're not allowed to share publicly and discuss with you as a result of Welsh Government's position. So, like I said, well-travelled ground between you and I, but I'm happy to continue those conversations offline as well, if you like.
I'm sorry, you are quite correct. It was 2011, the Welsh Assembly stopped publishing the education spending comparators with England. £604 per child more in England than Wales.
Simmons, I thought you were.
Sorry, you are right. I did get it wrong. I did get it wrong. It was 2011. The spending comparisons were stopped. It was about 2017, 18. The Welsh Assembly stopped publishing the comparators. Yeah, and finally, I got 2010. Oh, sorry. Sorry, cracking up by here, honest. CRR10, the Welsh Quality Housing Standard. This will be my last one on this. I can see John's eyes rolling. Yeah, we just spent £270 million on the Welsh Quality Housing Standard. We are just coming out of it. Now, I've been trying to find out whether there's any future-proofing has been built into the Welsh Quality Housing Standard with regards to carbon emissions. Because with our declared emergency, 17 to 18% of all carbon emissions are from homes. But there's nothing in policy planning guidance, there's nothing in technical advice notes, and there's nothing in supplementary planning that will allow any local authority across the UK, it's not Caerphilly, to influence the types of heating that is installed in their houses. And I can't remember the name of the developer. We'll say, oh, I won't pluck names, but they've just come out and they're lobbying the government as hard as is possible to lobby these people to remove the requirement for even stage increments towards carbon neutrality. So was there any future proofing built into the Welsh Quality Housing Standard? I don't know who's going to deal with that one, if you don't mind, please.
I'll deal with it as I've dealt with them before, Councillor Simmons. As much as I'd like to be an expert in everything, this is another area that is not one that I'm overly familiar with. But if you'd enable me to have a conversation with Dave Street, who's tied up in interviews at the moment, I'll get a briefing around to members on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Graham. Richard, while you're on, could you answer one for me, please? The CRR07, which is the school attainment, that's a problem with not just us, all the councils obviously got the same risk, I should imagine. And also I would think the Welsh Government are involved with this topic as well. So is there any coordination in how to actually alleviate this risk, either from the Welsh Government or other schools? Because we seem to be going at this on our own, it seems, when you look at this list of risks. You know, it's as if it's something unique to us alone, but it's not, is it? It's across Wales, this is a problem. So is there any cooperation and coordination in this sort of risk?
There's actually a huge amount of cooperation and coordination going on. It's certainly not something that is unique to Caerphilly, but if you just take our situation as a kind of case in point, with 87 schools all run by 87 different head teachers and senior leadership teams in 87 different areas across Caerphilly, many of which are in different kind of levels when it comes to affluence and deprivation, that the challenges are remarkably different even between two schools. So we work with the AS, we work with an organisation called ADU, who are the Association of Directors of Education across Wales. There's very, very close working relationships with Welsh Government. And I think everybody in this space is trying desperately to address this attainment issue. But you'll also appreciate, to be able to do that consistently across that many schools, that many local authorities, it's a real challenge. And what's also been thrown into the mix just of late, you'll appreciate there's now a new minister responsible for education across Wales, Jeremy Miles, who's getting up to speed as we speak. And underneath Jeremy, there's also been some changes in terms of the direct reports. His civil servants have also changed. So it's a really fluid piece at the moment, education. Again, everyone trying their best, trying to create a positive environment that gets the best out of everybody. But, you know, someone that came into the education arena fairly fresh and not jaded by working in that my entire life, I can't tell you how many variables there are at play to try and get this right. For us, it's about creating a positive environment. It's about communicating clearly, having a clear sense of direction, and really providing the support that people need to get the best out of their colleagues and their kids. You know, no one's going to tell me that that's the wrong way to go about things. It would just be nice if we had a set of an additional 2-year set of exam results to prove we were on the right track. But yeah, a real challenge nonetheless.
Yeah, thank you for that. And any work we did earlier before COVID is blown out the water with that coming along, obviously.
To an extent, but we did a lot of work on behaviours and how we were going to operate our relationships and our networks in that time. And I think that the positive support that we wrapped around our head teachers and our head teachers have provided us over that time frame has meant that we've been able to do some things through COVID that perhaps other local authorities would find more challenging because of the strength of the relationships that we developed in advance. I think if I was to reflect on where we are now, probably stronger than even before COVID has kicked in. We've seen some exceptional performance during that time across a huge number of our staff, very, very challenging circumstances. I just, you know, I place on record anywhere I could my heartfelt thanks and gratitude to the staff that have continued to deliver good services during that time frame. But yeah, you know, I've always been a believer that if you want to get the best out of people, you've got to have good, strong working relationships and a clear sense of direction. I think we've worked hard at that. Just want to get back on with the normal day job rather than the normal day job and all this other stuff as well.
Okay, thank you for that, Richard. I got a question on climate change. There was an article in the paper the other day regarding solar panels that the Caerphilly Council are venturing on to install on huge acres of land north of Penrowell, I think it was. Should this item have been mentioned in the climate change risk management under either the mitigation action or the progress update? Is it included in item 5 on that mitigation action, or on item 3 on the progress update? Can anyone answer that question?
Just while Roz is having a quick check, I mean, it's clearly an exciting project. I just wonder whether the time frame attached to this risk register perhaps predated that cabinet announcement. So
yeah,
it'll factor in the next quarter's update. But yeah, a great prospect, but nonetheless an awful lot of work to be done to potentially realise that opportunity as well.
It'll probably come up then in the next risk assessment information. Okay, thank you for that. I've got no other questions on that. Does anyone else have any questions? John Bridgewell has got his hand up.
Just quickly, Chair. I just wanted to pick up on Graham Simmons' point with regard to the NPFA, the National Playing Fields Association. and just remind him, of course, as he knows, that these are only guidelines. But there is also an understanding that this allocation of sports pitches always is balanced against the actual use of the pitches. And clearly within the local authority here, we have a number of pitches which actually get virtually no use whatsoever. There is also an issue with which I fully appreciate, and I think he's referring to this, about location of certain pitches. But overall, the number of pitches that we have is, in certainly my view, as an ex-professional in this area, probably more than adequate for the current needs. So I just thought I'd add that into the mix. That's all. If Graham didn't mind me just referencing that, thank you.
Not at all, John. No, that doesn't mean I agree, of course.
No, of course not.
Okay, thank you for that. So can we make a vote now, please, on the item 6, the regulator proposals and improvement progress update? Can we have someone to move that we accept that report, please?
Happy to move that, Chair.
Okay, and someone to second?
Second, Chair.
Happy to second. Yeah.
Thank you. Can we now vote on that item 6, please?
Hi, Chair. The vote's just coming up now. Sorry, can I just check? Is it corporate risk register you're taking a vote on? Thanks.
Yes. Oh, sorry. Yes, it is. I've gone to item 6, item 5, isn't it? Sorry.
No problem, Chair. We'll launch after you now. Just give it a second.
Yeah.
Thanks.
We'll hold that vote on item 6, okay? We'll vote on item 5. Can I put in my verbal vote? Nigel Yates is agreed to accept the report. And we have everybody voting in now. That report has now been agreed and passed. Thank you all. Now we'll move to item 6, and we'll have Ross presenting the report for the regulatory proposals for improvement progress update. Thank you, Ross.
Right, thank you, Chair. And we just right. Yes, so as you may be aware, the regulators make proposals for improvement. Sometimes they're statutory requirements, and this report is to update you, on the progress we're making and assure you we are making progress, and for any questions you might have. So you may notice that 1.2, we've got a new addition in the purpose of the report to also give an update of the audit accounts within this report as well, bringing them both together. So in the summary gives the numbers, how many items we have had on the register, how many proposals we think that we've addressed, and of course that's with your agreement. And in 2.3, this is the pieces of work that we've been received since the last time you've seen this. So this has been quite a while for you. January 2020 was the last time the regulator proposal was reported. The last 2 bullet points about delivering good governance and financial sustainability, I won't cover that. These are new pieces of work, and I know Gareth, our colleague from Audit Wales, is here to take you through those reports, their findings and so on. So I won't preempt his presentation. If I can take you through to 5.1, that just gives you a breakdown of the numbers. So what's outstanding under which piece of work. And from 5.2 onwards, trying to provide more context for you. Sometimes I go through them if that's something you want to discuss, but for today, from 5.2 down to paragraph 5.5, that gives you some context on those pieces of work, if they're delayed or how well they're progressing. And then my apologies, 5.8, and then 5.9 and 5.10 are the 2 pieces of work that Gareth will be presenting. There isn't anything to report at this time from other regulators, and there may be next time round, but there isn't on this occasion. And from 5.14 is the addition of some information regarding the Audit Wales accounts. So the actual register, which gives the detail of the regulatory report Appendix A, I have it as that listed the actual details and progress in more information. So again, I open to questions and anything anybody wants to discuss. Thank you.
Thank you, Ross. I think I have some questions. Is it Graham Simmons? You have a question on this report?
You was too quick then. I'm afraid I can't find it.
Okay, I think it was item 5.4, and I think you said 5.9. I don't know if that's correct.
Yeah, it's AW Ref 2272A. I don't know if we got it. I don't know whether you want to take this seriously or not, but no, I'm a simple man and simple pleasures. Yeah, the last job the job I retired from is we had a simple budget monitoring. Let's say you had £10,000 a year to spend on anything, and you spent 8. The following year you had 8. You didn't have an incremental increase. You just had 8. If you spent 12, you had a budget of 10 and a £2 million surplus that you could buy into. And it's amazingly simple, and it's amazingly well, it induces people to actually spend their budgets, because you only fail once. And in view of the fact that we've been recording these £10 million overspends, could we look at something like this? Very, very simple, very, very easy. It's just whether you've got the political will to actually go through with it. Thank you.
Can I come back in on that one, Chair?
Yeah, yes, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, we do have a system where we do incentivise people to spend their budgets, but where underspends do occur, 50% of the underspend is clawed back into the corporate centre, and 50% is actually retained by service areas, so it is still spent in those service areas. As I mentioned earlier, Councillor Simmons, the report we'll be looking at later does mention having a look at our budget monitoring arrangements. We're open to doing that. As I said, as part of the Sustainable Financial Planning Review, we will take that work stream forward. But as I've already said, we do have a system currently where we do try and incentivise services to spend their money by taking 50% of those underspends back into the corporate centre.
Thanks, Steve. Graham, do you have another question?
So sorry, yeah. Sorry. I'm still wrestling with this monitor. I'm sorry, Nigel. If there's anybody else, can I try and find it?
Yeah, we can come back. Was it on the financial sustainability assessment?
I believe it was page 37, 2.2 I got you, but I can't find it. My monitor, as I said, it's in full monster mode for some reason.
Okay.
Have a look at page 26, I think you said.
Yeah.
No, 37 I've got.
37.
Yeah. That's in the appendix, I think.
Yeah, 37 on my list is the, yeah, it's on the next item anyway.
Oh, okay.
So we can leave you keep searching, and we'll probably come back to it later on. So can we now vote on item 6 and accept the report? Can I have someone move, please?
Yes, I'll move. Councillor Adams.
Okay, can someone second that, please?
Second the report, Chair.
Thank you. Can you all vote now on item 6, please? Can I please my verbal vote that Nigel Yates accepts the report? Thank you. We've got all the votes in now, and now can we move on to the next item, please, which is Audit Wales Financial Sustainability Assessment. So can I ask Gareth Jones and Mark Jones to give the presentation, please?
Yes, thanks. Thanks, Chair. I can hear somebody speaking on the line. I don't know whether somebody should be on mute, but I can hear people speaking. It's one person anyway. But
yes, I can hear a bit as well. So could you please try and make sure that all your items are muted? Thank you. Thank you for that.
Thanks. I'll speak very briefly about the report, and then probably more importantly take any questions. Gareth and I will take any questions that members have. So just to touch on key messages from the report. The council continues to have a strong financial position. We said that last year in last year's local report as well, you might recall, and the position has strengthened further since last year. So in the past 12 months, it's got stronger again. Significant and rise in usable reserves. So, for example, the usable reserves were 82 million in March 2017, rising to 100 million in March 2020. That was ranked second highest in Wales, being 29% of net cost of services. And the expected reserves, subject to audit that we're about to start, the expected reserves as at March 2021 is expected to be 116 million. So that's taken up by a further 16 million based on the previous year. Significant revenue and capital budget underspends over the past 5 years. And as mentioned in the report, the revenue underspends total 79.8 million over the last 5 years. So the budget position in that sense is underspends rather than overspends. And that is part of the rise in reserves, for example. Strong liquidity position, sometimes called working capital. And by that, we mean if we did a liquidity calculation as of today on the balance sheet, in terms of the 12 months ahead, the council is owed more money than it owes other people. So you're owed more money, you've got more debtors than you've got creditors. So a working capital above 1 is a strong working capital. And if you look at the report, your working capital has been 2.4 down to 1.5 for a few years, and it's expected to rise again to 2.2. So a strong working capital ratio. So again, adding to the strong overall financial position. We touch on COVID costs in the report, and what we highlight in one of the exhibits is that for 2021, the COVID costs and the lost income totaled 34 million for the council, and the Welsh Government funded 32.8 million of those costs. So you had a net cost of 1.2 million. Good savings records, albeit for 2021, the savings were affected by the pandemic. So if you look at the report, the percentage of your planned savings is lower in 2021. And for 21-22, no savings have been set for that year for the council. In terms of the council's medium-term financial plan, we say in the report, as we did last year, is that it's brief and underdeveloped with limited information. As I say, we reported that position last year. The council has not made its planned improvements to the medium-term financial plan, but we do recognise in the report, we acknowledge and we fully understand the council's reasons for not doing so. Given all of the challenges in tackling the pandemic, we register the fact that we understand why those planned improvements have not been made. And I know that the leader and the chief exec and all officers are kind of committed to making those improvements in the coming year. There are 3 PFIs, proposals for improvements in the report. The one is on the medium-term financial plan. The second one is around budgeting and having a good hard look at the budgeting and how that is working, as Steve mentioned earlier in this committee. And the third one is around the transformation programme and getting that to lift off, if you like. And in the report, we mentioned the investment of monies into the transformation programme. For example, the appointment of 4 project officers. That should really make a difference in getting that moving forward. So just to close, as with last year, there'd be a national report as well. Last year, the national report was in October 2020. That's a public report, as the local reports are public as well. And that gives a report, a short report across all 22 councils and shows how they sit in relation to each other. So that report is due in the next couple of months, and therefore no doubt that national report will come to a future meeting of this committee. So I'll stop there, Chair, and happy to take, Gareth and I are happy to take any questions on this piece of work.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Do we have any questions, please? No? Okay.
There is one.
Here we go. Yes.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Mark and Gareth, for his input to any of the answers. Yeah. You're talking about our improved differentials up to 2.2 this year from whatever 1.5 and all of that, and that includes all of the things that we haven't yet got to pay for. And this is the answer, of course, that we have challenged to our financial controllers within the council year in, year out. Why are we getting more when we could be using it to improve all our services all over the council's needs and responsibilities? And it is because they are very flexible. We don't always know what might be coming next, and it's a good job that we're always looking to be improving our balance when we know that there's nothing in front of us that we have to spend for, but we also know there's an awful lot that's coming down the line that we need to have capital to meet those responsibilities and those obligations. So it will change as different circumstances hit us. So I would be preferred to in that position than where we're always looking to where can we get more money from to do something that we didn't realize that we would have to do. So it's a strong position that should remain strong, I believe. So well done to all our officers and our political leadership who have supported that view. Thanks both.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Ridgewell, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think to some extent Mike's actually covered this point, but I kind of reiterate it or slightly rephrase it. I think there are always siren voices on us to hit our reserves and spend more of them. And currently, I think the figure we just had quoted was 29%. I just wonder whether anybody from the audit office could give us a figure beyond which then they would think it was reasonable that we should start biting into this sum, because the forgive me, 120 million was it or something like that? I haven't got the figure to hand. I didn't write it down. Does seem like a substantial amount of money, and I could fully understand why some people think that should be spent. But there must be a point at which I'm assuming we would have too many reserves, and in which case then the auditor's view would be that we should spend some of it. Is there an optimum level? Perhaps as you're there, Gareth, you could answer that one.
You're on mute, Gareth.
Sorry,
You're on mute,
That
Gareth.
was going to happen. That was. Thank you, Councillor Ridgewell. Just to bring Mark back up to speed, Councillor Ridgewell's just asked if there's a percentage beyond which Audit Wales might take the view that the council should bite into reserves. I think on that one, I'm going to have to say Audit Wales doesn't set policy for you as an organisation, because that's not our role and remit. The council has its policy on reserves, and that's taken into policy and resources scrutiny on an annual basis. I can see that your section 151 officer wants to come in. So there are clearly ways in which the council sets its reserves policy, but the actual content of that policy and how that's executed has to sit with the council and with the executive of the council. So I'm going to ask Steve to maybe come in on that, because I think it's inappropriate for us to comment on a percentage point at which you might look at a tipping point. But I hand that on over to the section 151 officer.
Gareth, it's always worth a try. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Gareth, and thanks, Chair. I think we need to be careful here, because we use this term usable reserves, but the vast majority of those reserves are actually set aside for specific purposes. We do take a report through to the Policy and Resources Scrutiny Committee every year, where we give the details of why the reserves are held, the purposes of those reserves. And I think what's important as well is we've been building up, as you know, over the last few years to developing our place shaping framework. We've now set aside £30.2 million of those reserves to deliver that moving forward. At Council last week, you agreed to set aside reserves of around 13.4 million. So it's not as though we don't have plans for these reserves. I would expect the level of reserves over the next 18 months to 2 years to start to come down as we start to deliver on things like the place shaping programme and some of the many other investments that you've agreed we can make on a one-off basis moving forward.
Okay.
Thanks, Steve.
Thank you for that. Can I ask you a question, Steve? You said you set aside some of these reserves now for future use. What sort of timescale are you talking about with these reserves when they've been set aside for? What sort of period of time?
Well, it'd be different for many of them, but the place shaping report, I don't know whether you've seen that, Chair, but we can send a copy of that to you. That does set out an ambitious programme over the next 5 years and beyond. But I'd be more than happy to send you a copy of that report after this meeting for you to take a look at that one. But again, you know, we do challenge the use of reserves every year. I do discuss with heads of service whether they need to keep some of these reserves, and if they don't, we do claw them back into the centre. And I'll be doing that piece of work again now during the autumn in readiness for a further report to the P&R Scrutiny Committee in January.
Okay, thank you for that, Steve. Are there any other questions for either Gareth, Mark, or Steve? No? Okay. I don't think no vote required on this particular item. So can we now move on to item 8, which is delivering good governance review. And again, we have Gareth and Mark to present a presentation. Thank you.
Chair, would it be okay to see whether or not the Director of Corporate Services or the Cabinet member want to make any opening remarks before we offer any observations?
Yes, that'll be fine.
I'm happy to. Councillor Stenner would be happy to, albeit neither of us were expecting to. So, Councillor Stenner, do you want to say anything? Would you like me to say something, or are you happy to defer to Audit Wales?
I'm happy to defer to Audit Wales.
Okay, well, what I would say then, just to give Gareth a little bit of breathing space, is the report that's in front of you is a piece of work that both the authority requested and Audit Wales offered. We wanted to test our governance arrangements and to give them a really thorough assessment over a period of time. We had quite a robust discussion about how to frame this. I think the report sets out what we did, how we did it, and when we did it. But it also throws a spotlight on is that pesky COVID appearing in March 2020, right at the critical moment in terms of our self-evaluation, and really using significant amount of work that had gone into the review at that point in a meaningful sense. So I think it's testament both to Audit Wales and to those contributors from across the organisation that invested heavily in the early part of this work, that once COVID hit, we decided we also didn't want to just discount that work, albeit the organisation and the environment we were operating in at that point was significantly different to the time when we actually carried out the self-evaluation. So we've been keen to take the best out of what we found, and Audit Wales will share some of their observations and thoughts around that period with you. And the action plan attached then is our commitment really to refine some of those governance arrangements where required. But also recognising that we are still kind of in the midst of something. So it's been good to work alongside Audit Wales to get this review over the line. It's a pleasure to share it with you this afternoon, and hopefully Gareth will have a similar view of the world to us. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. Okay, Gareth, could you now present the findings?
Thanks, Chair. Okay, thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Cabinet member and the Corporate Director for their introduction, and apologies for surprising them with that. Just to say, you know, we drafted the report in late 2020. It reflects the position at that stage. So some of the observations around Cabinet forward work programmes were factually correct at that point, but we are also assured that looking at Cabinet forward work programmes in recent months, there's far more details over a longer plan for things such as the Cabinet forward work programme. I think we recognise that the Council's transformation journey is an evolving position, and obviously in response to the pandemic, which we're in the third wave of, the Council's learning from the pandemic and how that goes into transformation is obviously an evolving position as well. We'd initially planned to look at whether or not the governance arrangements, whether or not the Council is improving its governance arrangements so they support its transformation agenda. I think what we tried to do is take account of COVID, take account of where the Council is now, and to try and offer some pointers to strengthen those governance arrangements as they evolve into this new arrangement. I think what we've recognised is there were 5 areas that we picked out that we feel if the Council addresses those, it would help to strengthen and ensure that government helps to deliver the transformation aims and objectives. We see that the Council's action plan set out in the Appendix B to the report helpfully sets out the current position for the Council in respect to the areas that we've identified, but also sets out a series of actions that the Council plans to undertake to address those matters. What we will do is we will focus on these matters in our ongoing work, and it is a live conversation between ourselves and officers and also cabinet members around how we challenge the transformation strategy, the strategic recovery framework, and also the programme of corporate reviews. So just to draw your attention to the key headings, we found that aspects of the Council's arrangements are not yet sufficiently well developed to support the increasing scale of the Council's wide-ranging transformation programme. And we reached that conclusion because the Council's incomplete assessment of its own arrangements focused too heavily on the existence of documents and processes rather than on their impact and effectiveness. On that point, I would note that the Council had commissioned an external expert to review its own assessment. COVID stood in the way of that. So that is an understandable finding, and we understand the reasons why we found that. We also found that the Council's ambition has increased and aspects of its arrangements are not sufficiently well developed to ensure a rigorous and consistent focus on corporate priorities. So the 5 areas that we identified were: the first one was to consolidate the Council's priorities, so the corporate plan, strategic recovery framework, and the transformation strategy, just to make sure that there is the coherence and people understand how those all work together. And you will see in the action plan how the Council is going to respond to that area. To assign responsibilities to ensure that there's a clarity of role at both officer and also political levels. Monitor progress and evaluate effectiveness. And that's linked very much to the Directorate and Corporate Performance Assessments, which will feed into the self-assessment duties under the Local Government and Elections Act, which you as a Governance and Audit Committee will be engaged in as that Act progresses through. So it will be an important part of the Council being able to demonstrate how it's moving from where it is today to where it intends to be through its programme of transformation. Planning the Cabinet's work, I've referred to this in terms of scheduling key decisions in advance and ensuring then that the scrutiny can be involved to challenge constructively the Council's progress on delivering its objectives and setting the direction of travel. And then the last point that we raised, which is highlighted in paragraphs 15 and 16 of the report, is around the transparency of decision making, and to ensure that to increase the transparency of decision making, papers that support decisions should include adequate discussion of alternative options, and to make explicit the views of the monitoring officer and section 1.5 officer with regard to the recommended course of action. Against each of those areas that we've identified, the Council has set out how it's going to initially approach that in its action plan. So members may wish to ask some questions, but happy, as Mark was, to take any questions on the report.
Okay, do we have any questions on the report, please? No? Okay. Can I ask the authority now to explain the response that it's a very good report, by the way, Gareth, I thought. And we have some very good answers to the questions that you've raised. Could I ask the authority to present the answers to us, please?
I think, Chair, in terms of what's in front of you today, you've received the initial project brief that scoped the review. You've received Audit Wales's findings, and you've received our action plan. I think it's incumbent upon us now to get on with that action plan and to come back to you and keep you updated as an audit committee as we make progress against those items identified by Audit Wales. I think what I'd also like to add as well, and it's quite a subtlety, but it was welcome, was these are not proposals for improvement or statutory recommendation. These are matters for consideration, and Audit Wales were at pains at the time that we were working through this to reference them that way, so that we as a council and Audit Wales could have some iterative discussions about whether we agreed on those matters or whether we had a different view on them. And it was a really useful framework actually for getting to a place where, you know, we could set an agreed direction of travel. So it's worth referencing, you know, that they're not proposals for improvement, they're not statutory recommendations, they're actually really helpful things for us. I think the other thing that came through from our perspective was that a lot of those recommendations, sorry, I've fallen into the trap now, a lot of those matters for consideration were actually about making our decision-making processes much more open and straightforward to members of the public. I think we do have a tendency as local government officers to overcomplicate some things. And I think the references to clarifying the corporate plan, strengthening decision-making arrangements set out within this report will really help members of the public to engage in what we do and how we do it. I think the other point I'd make as well, Chair, and you know, Gareth may or may not want to make a comment on this, but when we had our audit and risk workshop with Audit Wales and colleagues from Estin and CSIW, I think the takeaway from that I was most comfortable with was the reference from Audit Wales that our governance arrangements are much improved. And I think what you've seen here is a report that will help us improve them further. But we've come a long way. More work to do, but we've come a long way. And you know, I'd like to place on record my thanks to Gareth and colleagues for helping us through that journey. So that's me, Chair. That's what we've got to deliver now, and your job's to keep on top of us and make sure you do.
Thank you very much, Richard, and thank you, Gareth and Mark, for the presentation. We look forward to the results of what you proposed. Thank you.
Thank you.
No vote required on this item. This concludes the meeting. I would like to thank everybody for attending this afternoon, Zoom's Governance and Audit Committee. I declare the meeting closed, and you will now hang up, please.
Not before saying thanks, Chair. Have a good